back for our monthly visit.
Your Honor, it is always great to be back. Lots to talk about and a great show for our viewers today.
Yes, we have three of the members of the Indiana Court of Appeals you'll be hearing from a little bit. But let's talk about all, there's not enough time, all the things that have been happening politically here in Indiana and nationally.
Well, nationally, it appears that your former party is about to hand the nomination to someone who has 91 felony counts pending, been convicted in a civil jury of rape and defamation, bankrupted a casino, amongst other great achievements of your party's, your old party's obvious nominee.
Well, you're telling everybody you're going to vote for Trump, right? Well, let's talk about local politics.
Let's talk about local politics.
Have you ever seen at the state and local level so many challenges of candidates running in the primary?
I have not, and we have seemed to have a bit of a kerfuffle here recently about who can run and who can be this and who can be that. The gentleman that ran as a libertarian now wants to be chair of the party that he attempted to divide or something. I can't keep it straight.
What's really interesting, the backdrop for all this is the Indiana Supreme Court upheld the party rules by having to at least participate in 2 successive primaries of your particular party you want to affiliate with. They found those to be constitutional and enforceable. It's a major decision.
Do you agree with that decision?
I do, and I'll tell you why. What separates this country from other democracies is like Italy, for example. They have how many different parties? 30 different parties. Whoever wins has to form a coalition, and they're in a constant state of uproar. The two-party system, although not set forth in our Constitution, I think has been the backbone of our constitutional form of government, has kept things together, and I think it was wise for the Supreme Court to honor those 2 parties and their rules.
The young people in the room would probably want to argue, maybe want to talk about the fact, however, it makes it damn near impossible for a third party, and this could be an election where the Democrats are not crazy about their candidate, Mr. Biden. A lot of Republicans are not crazy about their candidate, former President Trump. We're ripe for a third party, but the system is almost impossible now, money-wise, ballot requirement-wise, for a third party to form.
So you're telling me you're going to support the no labels group?
No. I will stay true to my roots. But it seems to me, while I hear what you're saying, maybe a couple of more parties wouldn't be a bad thing.
I think this is a wake-up call for both parties to open their platforms, open their opportunities to become involved to more people and identify with the common person. I think the parties have shied away from that. They're all wrapped up in seniority, all wrapped up in whose turn it is. Let's talk about getting the rank and file involved in a particular party and make our electoral system work.
And make it easier to vote,
Exactly.
Allow, we seem to, at least one party seems to try to make it harder for people to vote all the time, which is too bad. Well, I think we have an interesting gubernatorial primary
6
coming
Republican
up
candidates.
in our one-party state. A local, our sitting lieutenant governor, Evansville native,
Right.
Served dutifully with Governor Holcomb for 8 years. I don't know how anybody would handicap this race. Just depends on who you talk to.
The numbers, the latest polls have been done. I don't know how accurate they are, but they show that Braun has it's like 33% support, and he's the only candidate in double figures. However, he has slipped from 41 down to 33, which means this is a very fluid situation. We won't know. The only poll that counts is the one on election day.
He's run one commercial, and his commercial says, "I'm Trump's guy." Is that all you need in the state of Indiana? That's where he's put all of his money.
Apparently, that's what his handlers are telling him.
It just, I can't get over it. I'm and you are both old enough to remember the question whether Bill Clinton inhaled and whether he tried to avoid the draft was a character issue, dominated that election, and that was 1992 or something like that?
Yes, 92.
And here we are, 2024, with this kind of baggage, and it just doesn't seem to matter.
if I would have said the name Monica Lewinsky, this crowd out here would have no idea who I was talking about.
Well, maybe, maybe not. But it's going to be interesting. I'm hearing the Indianapolis people say it's bronze race to lose. But what I think maybe they are discounting is the fact that Suzanne Crouch, for 8 years, has been in that job, worked with every county chair, every commissioner and auditor has been in charge of. The lieutenant governor has a variety of
Department of Commerce is
in
under
her
her?
portfolio,
Yeah.
commerce,
Agriculture.
agriculture.
Right.
So the connection's there, and it's a primary. So
Correct.
it's got to be motivated to vote. So I wouldn't count her out.
Well, besides politics, but this sort of overlaps with politics, have you ever seen an outpouring of the general public and elected officials involved in a non-political issue like the CenterPoint rate increase?
That has been amazing. It seems like maybe our political elected officials were pulled in after the fact, after the public. So representative government, the public square, public opinion, free marketplace of ideas still means something in this country of ours.
Yeah, it does mean something, and it's really interesting. It's the Utility Regulatory Commission was here to conduct public hearings. It started like at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It went to 11 o'clock at night, and people were still standing in that room.
Well, pocketbook issues still probably decide votes more than anything else, which would be why the Republicans have changed from the economy now to the border again. But that is the thing that drives people more than anything because, you know, that's what we pay our bills with.
The General Assembly wound their business up last week.
Not early enough for a lot of us.
It was a non-budget year, so
It was.
next year will be the very important year. We'll outline the budget for the state for the next 2 years.
I haven't kept up too much. I've been in my southern office a lot here in this first quarter. But let me say, did they do any ideological absurdity? I mean, did we restrict a woman's right to choose now to how frequently she can have sex or
No,
anything
but
like that? Did they, any more idealism in the legislative session?
No, but there was a bill, I don't know if it passed or went through or not, that would make it mandatory to teach cursive writing in our public schools.
Well, there's a big problem. Now, of all the problems we've got out there, cursive writing, I think, should probably rank right up there at the top.
Well, we got a great show today.
We do indeed. 3
3 members of the Indiana Court of Appeals. Stay tuned, and you will hear some very wonderful and intelligent jurists right on this program. And we're back, and we're very excited and proud to have with us 3 of the outstanding members of the Indiana Court of Appeals, Judge Elaine Brown, Judge Melissa May, and Judge Leanna Weissman. Good to have all of you. Now, Judge Brown, can you explain, is this official Court of Appeals eyewear, or what's going on here?
It is today. It's a show of solidarity with Judge May because she has a dry eye issue and the lights in this room make it really difficult for her to see. So, especially in light of the eclipse coming, we thought it was more than appropriate.
And with that introduction, perhaps we should tell our 3 million viewers why the court has visited
Exactly.
Evansville, because this is not where they usually sit. And I can ask that question as the only unrobed, non-judicial type present.
We normally sit in our courtroom, which is in Indianapolis, but we do traveling oral arguments. We call them appeals on wheels. And we take them to universities, colleges, high schools, elder facilities. We have been at a couple state parks. We have done oral arguments at a lot of different places. And we take a real case and bring it on the road to the people in the community so they can see how the Court of Appeals actually works. How different it is in a trial court, where the trial court hears evidence and the trial court hears witnesses, and we don't. We listen to the arguments of counsel and review the record and apply the law.
So tell us a little bit about the case that brought you, or that the kids, the students at USI got to hear about today.
We heard a criminal case today that came out of Maryville, Indiana, from the northern part of the state on a accused burglar, and the issue was whether or not the trial court had properly admitted some evidence and whether or not the evidence that had been properly admitted was sufficient to sustain the conviction.
Judge Weissman, pick up on this point that Judge May was talking about a moment ago about reviewing the record. Differentiate between a trial court judge and what an appellate court judge does.
The trial court judge is in the trenches watching things as they go past and needing to make really split-second decisions. We have the benefit of hindsight. So we sit up in the booth, we can review tape, we could look at what happened at the trial court level and see if the judge made some sort of error in the admission of evidence. So that's primarily how it's a little bit different, is we have the benefit of hindsight and time.
And you look at the record at the trial court level, you don't have evidence presented to you folks, do you?
We do not. So we just look at what the trial court judge heard. We don't go searching for other evidence. We don't Google cases. We don't, look for other evidence. If we are going to review it, it has to be something that was presented in front of the trial court judge.
So why don't we, for our viewers, explain the way our court system in this state is set up, where you are in it, where Judge Shively, how that whole thing works.
The trial court, or the court system in Indiana, is like a pyramid. So at the bottom of the pyramid, you have the trial courts, where the massive amount of justice in the state of Indiana is done. It's with all the almost 600, I think, trial court judges and magistrates across the state of Indiana. And then when a case is decided in the trial court, it comes up to the Court of Appeals, which is an intermediate court of appeals. There are 15 judges on the intermediate court of appeals. We sit in panels of 3. There are 3 of us here. And we sit as a panel and decide cases. We have general jurisdiction. Basically, anything that comes up from the trial court in a decision other than death penalty and taxes and life without parole will normally come through our court first. Now, the Supreme Court can pick and choose sometimes and take something, but normally that's how it works. Trial court, intermediate court of appeals, which is us, and then if a party is unhappy with the result that they got in our court, they can what's called petition for transfer to the Indiana Supreme Court, which is the top level. There are 5 justices on the Indiana Supreme Court, and they have the right to decide whether or not they want to take a case on transfer or not. So in the trial court, you have maybe 1.5 to 2 million cases per year. On our court, we issue about 2,000 written opinions a year. There are a lot of other orders and things like that, but that's the written opinions. And then on the Supreme Court, they usually issue about 80 to 90 opinions a year. We have no discretion, and we also can't pick and choose who gets what case. So, for example, Judge Brown will get every 16th civil case, every 16th criminal case, every 16th child case, and we don't choose. They just show up on our computers.
Let me ask you both all this, 3 of you. Judge Brown's been a trial judge and a member of the Court of Appeals. One of the things I've observed in my 11 years on the bench is an incredible increase in disrespect for judges and for court proceedings. Are you seeing that at your level?
I have not noticed that. I think the Court of Appeals of Indiana has an excellent reputation, particularly in our timeliness. We produce an opinion on average 7 weeks from the date a case is fully briefed, on average. I lose respect for courts when they are used for political reasons. And there's been a lot of recent examples of that, and I think that's quite disturbing and a very bad use of judicial resources.
One thing that I would like to mention, I echo what Elaine said, but there has been a decrease in civility among lawyers and among sometimes the language used when lawyers try to argue their cases. And I think that happens probably more at the trial court because they're in the heat of battle. They're arguing and they're talking back and forth. But sometimes it shows up in the briefs. And I would like to encourage everyone to be more civil to each other.
And that would apply to that percentage of our 5 million viewers that are not lawyers. Be
That
civil
would
is pretty good
absolutely
advice.
apply to them.
I would love to take Judge Brown's invitation as a segue into our banter and talk about the most political court, the U.S. Supreme Court, but we will save that for a later discussion when our esteemed guests are not.
Today you had an oral argument here at USI.
Yes,
You don't hear oral arguments in every one case you hear, correct?
correct.
Or come before you, I should say. How many oral arguments do you do a year?
We do about 60. We
I'd
don't
say,
do them
yeah.
all on the road.
Yeah,
we
because I
do
think
about
last year we did
30 to 35.
35 traveling oral arguments
it?
alone, yeah.
What do you look at in determining whether you want to have an oral argument? What factors?
I look at whether or not you state in your motion for oral argument the reasons why oral argument is necessary. I'm not likely to vote to grant it if there's no reason stated.
So don't use the boilerplate language.
Right.
So go beyond that. Remember that we're issuing about 2,000 written opinions a year. So oral argument is something that is necessary and we really enjoy doing them. We just can't do them on every case.
Sometimes I'm more likely to grant oral argument or even order oral argument when one hasn't been requested. If it's a case that has a unique issue or something, especially in a traveling oral argument, that we think would be of interest to the audience that we have.
As the grandfather of triplet girls, what strikes me and what I think is a marvelous thing is that when you and I started practicing law as the elder people that are present here today, I think maybe Betty Bartow, maybe, she might have been on the Court of Appeals, I'm not sure, at that time in 1970.
Well, Sue
Yeah.
Shields would have been the first.
I argued those cases and it was all white males for the most part. And now we show the students here at USI and the students that have joined us here today. We have 3 women with distinguished careers and just talk about that. Your own road to get to where you are in the intermediate court of here in Indiana. For our viewers that aren't lawyers, I think it is a wonderful thing in terms of young ladies growing up and the opportunities that are there, including my granddaughters.
Well, as a senior member on the panel, I'll take the privilege of going first and answering that. I grew up on a farm in northern Indiana, and when I went to college, I was the first woman in my family to go to college. And I was going to be a concert pianist. That necessarily, obviously, didn't work. And I kind of settled on looking at criminal justice and other things to do. I ended up going to law school, and I was the first woman in my family to go to law school. My grandfather, when told I was going, said I had enough education for a girl. I didn't listen, of course. And then I came here to Evansville, and I practiced law here for 14 years. And before Judge Shively was a judge, he and I were in the same firm for a while. And then 14 years in, I had an opportunity to apply to the Court of Appeals, and I did, and managed to get appointed. It has been one of the best decisions I ever made to go to law school and to practice law down here specifically because the bar in Evansville and Southern Indiana is probably one of the most supportive bars, and I'm prejudiced because that's where I practiced, but it's one of the most supportive bars ever. And I think they really care about young lawyers coming in and want to make sure that they do a good job and represent their clients right. So that was kind of my trip to the appellate court. Judge Brown?
Sure, so I was a fine arts major at IU Bloomington and taught art in the Greater Jasper school system for 3 years before I went to law school. And I chose the law because they accept people from varying backgrounds, and I did not have to go back and pick up undergraduate courses before I could begin law school. And then I graduated and practiced law for 5 years in Jasper and was approached about running for the bench, which I did. And I suppose I broke a bit of a glass ceiling in that regard because I was the first female to ever serve as judge in that county. And I ran against the male incumbent who'd been on the bench for 10 years. And here was I, almost fresh out of law school, and a female at that. So I remember doing things like wearing a tie with a suit to make myself look more like a man. That part didn't work, but nonetheless, it's like taking on another full-time job to run a political campaign. But I did it, and I won and served 2 terms. and then moved out of the county, moved to Evansville, in fact, and practiced law for 3.5 years here, then moved back to Du Bois County because I missed the bench, and 2.5 years later ran a contested campaign and was reelected. And then 3.5 years later, I was appointed by Governor Daniels to this position.
So my path is somewhat similar to my colleagues, but I also grew up on a farm in southeast Indiana on a tobacco farm, was raised very poor, was the first female in my family to go to college, and my grandfather also lectured my parents on wasting money on educating a girl, so I had that going on for me as well. I went to college thinking I was going to be a journalist, and I studied journalism. That just did not quite work out. Applied to law school and gratefully was able to get in. Spent most of my career back in my small community doing public defender work and working for people whose voices would not have otherwise been heard, and did probably about 400 appeals. Won one actually in the United States Supreme Court in 2018. And then applied to the appellate bench and got on about 4 years ago during the midst of the pandemic.
Well, it's amazing. And the breakdown of the 15 judges on the Court of Appeals by gender is what?
Currently, there's one more male on the court than female.
But
at the current
almost
time.
50-50.
Almost 50.
I think I just heard the dean at a luncheon of our law school, my law school, your law school, in Florida say that the incoming class will have more women in law school than men. And just the dramatic change. I mean, I started law when I was about 10 years old, so I'm not all that old.
You and
But
Abe-
Me
you
too.
and
in
Abe Lincoln
45
studied-
years of practice, it's amazing.
You and Abe Lincoln studied together.
Well, we read the law. Well, I think that it is great, and I think the students now know that unlike our mothers who had secretary, teacher, or nurse available to them, if they were bold enough to get outside the home, right now, at least in your own careers, those ceilings have been broken, haven't they?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
One of the challenges today for the legal profession is the fact there are not enough lawyers. And I've noticed that when we used to have these judicial high days with the mock trials, we'd ask the students, how many of you are going to go into law? Now, very few high school students raise their hand. What can you say? We've got a little bit of an audience out here. What can you say to the young people here today about a career in the law?
I've been sorry a lot of my opponents went to law school.
Well, there's that. You don't have to practice law to benefit from a law degree. You can go into business, multiple positions. It's definitely been worth it for the three of us. I don't know too many lawyers who are sorry they went to law school.
Well, lawyers are problem solvers. I mean, that's what we do as lawyers, or we help people solve their problems, because that's why they come to you, because they have something they can't handle on their own in the legal system. They don't understand it.
And I think selfishly from a career perspective, if you're looking for something that will give you flexibility, a law degree will do that. So you will have the flexibility to use your skills in any way that you want. When I got pregnant with twins, my twins are 25 years old now, I went from a thriving, bustling, in the courtroom all the time practice to becoming an appellate attorney, and I did it at home. And I worked nights and weekends, and I stayed home with my kids and raised the kids while I also practiced law. And during that time, I won a case at the United States Supreme Court while briefing
Wow.
this case in my pajamas after the kids had gone to bed in my home office. So flexibility, flexibility, flexibility.
But the hallmark of Shively and Shoulders, of course, is both sides of the issue. And I wish we had more time because while there may not be enough lawyers, the answer is not allowing people to sit for the Indiana bar who have not gone to an accredited law school, which is a program that's been foisted upon us all. And I wish we had time to argue about that.
My suggestion would be to write a letter to the Supreme Court.
There are legal deserts in the state of Indiana. We have counties in the state of Indiana where there are no lawyers except the judge and the prosecutor.
We think that supply and demand is fine for the economy and it fixes all their other problems. Why, if there ain't no lawyers there, that's probably because there ain't no money to be made.
I don't think that's true necessarily. The reason I don't is there are even if there is no money to be made specifically in that county, there are still people in that county who need representation.
Right.
And that is, I could go on for hours about the Coalition for Court Access and how it's important to have civil legal aid in all sorts of areas, but you have time limits and I can't go there. You guys
Well-
can talk about it after I leave.
We now have a reason to invite you back to Volume 2 of Pat and the Judges.
Happy to. Thank you so much.
Folks, thank you for being here.
Our
When we
pleasure,
come
thanks.
back, I'll take one more shot at Patrick.
Well, Your Honor,
Yes, sir.
I was surrounded by judges today, and even I learned a lot. It's wonderful to have, for our community, to know that the Indiana Court of Appeals cares enough to visit Evansville and to share what it is they do, their lives, how they got where they are, with our students and with the public.
I think it's wonderful. And also, this program that was held out here at USI today, it was a real case involving real lives of real people. And this is a very rare moment where citizens could see their Court of Appeals in action.
And we had 3 female Court of Appeals judges, which honors the USI women's team who just kicked
Yes.
butt in whatever tournament they just won, right? The
Exactly.
conference tournament.
Exactly. Well, you still haven't filed to run for Congress, right? Is it still too late?
I have not, but I did accomplish this. Larry Bouchon, the anonymous congressman, has announced that he's not going to run. And how many have lined up for that job?
9.
Stay tuned. Watch us in April. I might announce then. Thanks for watching Shively and Shoulders.